Hello. On Wednesday, the 14th of January, myself and Mr. Owens led a parental engagement session in the canteen with the theme called The Anxious Generation. I spoke about smartphones, social media, childhood well-being, and Mr. Owens moved on to AI. Now, Mr. Owens' recording is separate. I'm going to spend just a few minutes going over some of the content that was shared during part one of this engagement session. Now, The Anxious Generation is a book by Jonathan Haidt that some of you may have heard of. Myself and other members of the leadership team read this book over the last couple of years and discussed it and looked through the themes and ideas from it. Now, this is not a book that we've adopted fully as a school. It's not about educational research. It's theory based. It's based on research that Jonathan Haidt has completed. We took a lot of themes from this that we agree with, which is why we led this engagement session to share our thoughts as a school, but also how we could just help parents in the modern world that we all live in today. So you can see some information on the screen that shares about who Jonathan Haidt actually is. And then I'm going to be talking through just some of the key takeaways from the book. If there are one or two things from this that you take and you can use to support you, then that's good. That's what we want to hear. So the reason why we led this session, because we believe, and hopefully you agree, the childhood today looks very different to how it did when we were all at school a few years back, let's say. Globally, there's been a sharp rise in anxiety, mood levels, poor well-being, poor sleep, and the book firmly believes this is linked with the increase in technology use for students, especially around the 2010 mark when smartphones started to be introduced. Again, why we've chosen to do this, students are getting younger to be trusted with smartphones, and we see it as parents, we see it as educators, where children are using smartphones to message, to talk to each other, to get content from the internet at a much younger age than ever was before, especially in our childhoods as well. And sadly, we have seen some poor choices from students within our school, and every school has seen the same thing. Whereas lots of that's happening outside of school, we just want to offer our advice and how we can support families with this. And myself and Mr. Owens are both parents of young primary age children, and we are worried that what we want our children to be able to use things correctly as well, which is what the focus of our engagement session was. The book basically explains that childhood then compared to childhood now. So you can see the bullet points that are there on the screen. You can pause if you want to just read over them, but I have mentioned some of them to you already. The third bullet point down then, when conflict used to happen when we were younger without screens, whether it was conflict, arguments, sorting things out on the playground, down at the local park, they were dealt with in person, whereas conflict nowadays can happen a lot more on screens, which causes a whole host of problems. And the book focuses on, it's called The Great Rewiring, about how the internet changed over times. And you'll see bolded there, and I mentioned this, 2010 was when smartphones, the Apple iPhone was introduced, and other companies followed suit with cameras, high-speed internet access, and it really did change the way that phones were used, not just for messaging and phone calls, but what could be done on there, and social media, etc. So it talks all about the great rewiring, about how that changed. And then a few years after 2010, that's when patterns really began to emerge with issues amongst teenagers. But sadly, that has got younger and younger over the last decade. I'm not going to read all these bullet points out. I'm going to focus on a couple of them, and then you can pause and read the other one that's there. But it talks about the difference between a play based childhood without the use of smartphones or technology against a phone based childhood. This is not to say that having phones and devices could not be a positive. Obviously, you can do things with them that we couldn't do, which increases learning and lots of other things as well. However, a few fundamental issues here that the book talks through. During a play based childhood, any argument, unkind comment, poor decision can be quickly be forgotten because it's said in person, apologies can be made, and children can move on. Whereas a phone based childhood, if something is written, it is there forever. As we know that, and we teach the children that it can be saved, it can be screenshotted, it can be sent on to a million other people, it can be placed on social media. By doing that, there is no coming back from what has been said. So very different to a play-based childhood. We've got there the second bullet point on the left. Learning happens through natural consequences. You can get in trouble, friends can walk away from each other, adults can support, but the child can reflect and can move on again. Whereas one poor choice on a phone can escalate very quickly beyond the original situation. Social skills in a play-based childhood were much stronger because of the face-to-face interactions, looking at facial expressions, body language, and you learn about how to react to those situations the more you have to deal with them. But behind screens and laptops, which I know I'm doing right now, I'd much rather do this in person, which we did. Behind screens, it's very different to understand people's feelings due to the fact that you're not seeing them in person. So you can pause now and read some of the other bullet points, and I'm going to move on. Couple of points from the book again. Social deprivation since 2012, the amount of time adolescents spend with friends face to face has increased significantly. I think we will be aware of that and we can see that. Gaming comes into that as well, but actually getting out and seeing people has reduced down, sadly. Sleep deprivation has increased a lot, and that links to depression, anxiety, other cognitive defects as well. So it's a key issue, sleep deprivation, when it comes to children being on devices more often. And then attention fragmentation. Because our phones constantly interrupt what we're doing, we are finding, well, we see it as adults in ourselves, but also in the students, that they find it harder to stay attentive to situations because they're used to having more interruptions. And then addiction, as with any lots of other things, we've seen it. We've seen it from students where children can become addicted to their phones, to their devices. Obviously, dopamine goes through the brain. They get that immediate enjoyment from being on a device or seeing something, seeing a like, seeing a message. However, that does lead to addiction. It can do. So we have to be very careful of that. Oh, I've gone forwards too many slides. This says impact on girls, impact on boys. I would argue that you don't need to separate girls and boys, but the book does this. The pressure that it can put on young students, young children, to look their best, to be their best, to put their best foot forward. That unrealistic pressure can be a huge problem. And then for boys and girls, if they are not in social or physical situations, they're not taking risks, their bodies are not being in situations where that kind of physical risk is a good thing, as we are learning and having exposure to outside areas. So impact on play is huge. We spoke about this in the session, that playing outside and not having adult intervention, not having structured learning, but actually just playing. Children are sadly playing less than we used to as children. So a few things that we've seen at schools in Dubai. We've seen friendship bust-ups due to online connectivity. And interestingly, we may not see this at school. The children may engage fine. They may be in the same class. But then outside of class, there is this online issue that's taking place, which didn't used to happen without the devices. We've seen children finding it difficult to deal with conflict because they're not used to it, especially when it's in person, when dealing with conflict within school. We are seeing, as the leadership team, a lot more parental anxiety around the pressure for having devices at a younger age because other families are doing that. We're seeing less independent age-related play opportunities. That's come up lots in terms of children not having that independence by themselves, partly due to the fact which the society we live in nowadays is very different to decades ago. So we have to be careful, but we also need to be careful not to overdo that and not allow our children to learn things independently themselves. And we're seeing children having a lot more exposure to things way beyond their age because of how easy it is to be on a mobile phone or device. At the bottom there, it says more restlessness and sleep, which I've spoken about. So what we're doing as a school, and this is important for parents and families to see, that we are obviously playing our part to support as much as possible. And I'm going to come on to what families should be doing and what children should be doing, because ultimately it's about us working together to educate our children to be the best they possibly can be. Within school, though, we have, as you know, a clear phone-free environment. Year six children can start to have a mobile phone if parents wish them to, for safety of going to and from school. However, these need to be in fixed locked pouches like secondary students, and they are not ever out in school at any point, and that's primary and secondary. We all the time are checking our explicit teaching of online safety, digital citizenship. This comes up regularly throughout the school year, and we're always looking at ways to help support children with that. The internet within school is filtered, monitored, so that the children can't have access to things that they shouldn't do. We promote a healthy attitude towards devices. We do not shy away from them and laptops and iPads within school. However, if you walk down the corridors in our school, you're not seeing every single child sitting on a device for the whole lesson. It's tech for purpose, and the children understand that, and we lead by modelling on that as well. We support our community where possible. We talk with families. We put on in these engagement sessions to help to ensure that, as I said, that message is clear to the students, that parents and school educators are all aligned. If issues do arise, we work with those families. We're proactive at monitoring student well-being, so we collect data on students and how they're feeling, and we support them along the way. We put interventions in place to help. So last few bullet points that are there, you can take a look, you can take a read, you can pause and ensure that you've taken this on board. And I'm going to move on. Okay, what can parents do, families do? Now, some of this advice here is directly from the book, which we took out the key points that we think could help this situation. We obviously cannot decide when families choose to let their children have smartphone devices, but what we would argue is that there's enough evidence to say to delay it as much as possible. And if you feel like your child needs to have a mobile phone, there are other alternatives, basic phones that don't have all of the same functions and cannot go on social media platforms when children shouldn't be on them until they are in their teen years anyway. So there are other alternatives that are there, but we would say to delay it as much as possible. And one thing we would say, it might come later on, in your friendship groups, when there's peer pressure potentially, it's to have open conversations with the parents of those children. If you can come to an agreement of when you might consider having mobile phones in the future, if everyone agrees with that, then it takes away the pressure for the child and for yourselves as family as well. Avoid giving devices as rewards for emotional regulation. Children need to regulate their emotions with other ways to sort of stimulate that and to be rewarded by that. And it gives the wrong message that here's a device, well done for what you're doing, because it increases that dopamine response system. Any downloads that children have on devices, make sure that they are parental approved, and Apple and other devices can do lots of different things to help with it. And please do use the age appropriate parental controls and filters. And I would like to say children that are on social media under the age of 13 should not be on it, and that's the law. If families are choosing to do that, you're putting your child at risk with content that they could see, because as we know, the social media platforms are doing their job to keep people hooked on and engaging with their platforms. Boundaries: set clear boundaries with your with devices, screen time limits, weekends, evenings, that kind of thing. Creating tech-free times, so whether it's dinner time, morning times, breakfast, like not having technology, and we have to do that as parents as well, to make sure that what we're saying we are following. Phones, devices, the book recommends not having them anywhere near bedrooms. Even having them on charge, it's better to have them in other areas, whether it's outside bedrooms or living room areas, but deciding on a place as a family, which links to the next point about agreeing on family rules together. Where there is pushback, which there will be from children, consistency builds security. Right, what else can parents do for help with childhood? Make sure your children are outside playing, play outdoors every day where it is possible to do that. Have play dates outside. If you have a play